previous video we made, we spoke a bit about anxiety and what it is. So we wanted to also speak about how anxiety is presenting with the lockdown and with the current crisis of COVID-19, because we know that anxiety is something that a lot of people are struggling with. And even if the anxiety was manageable previously, it's sort of heightened now. I mean, there's so many changes that people are going through.
Yeah.
And I think it's sort of anxiety on different levels currently. It's in terms of economic changes happening, and it's even as small as in your own home. And the fact that we spoke about some of the changes that is happening and the fact that people have to adjust to that. So even I think, it's presenting in different ways, and it's some of it's very real changes that people are having to face and deal with, and a lot of uncertainty, I think, as well. And I also think anxiety is coming in with not knowing, with uncertainty in terms of businesses, kids going back to school, and having to juggle everything within the home environment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's, anxiety is something that it's prevalent in all situations, but now it's blown up. I think it's magnified. It's a concept that we see way more. People are struggling. I personally didn't think that I would ever live through a time like this, where the government basically forces us to stay at home to keep everyone safe. It's a strange thing to try and understand and process. I've never been exposed to something like this. So now we have this concept of anxiety, and it is changing. It's still there. It's still very much what a lot of people have always struggled with for a long time. But now it's almost like it's condensed versions of it in a very small space, because, as you know, people aren't allowed to go out. They aren't allowed to exercise. Now, normally, if we sit here and people ask us, how would you deal with anxiety? One of my suggestions would be, well, have you tried exercise or yoga, anything like that? However, now it's different.
Yeah.
Now there's massive restrictions placed on these people, and I think that adds to it, because now we have to understand anxiety. For a lot of people, they are now being exposed to what anxiety is and having to deal with it, but having to deal with it in very specific circumstances. It's not all understanding anxiety in the normal conventional way where you can go out and deal with it in so many different ways, go for a hike or a run. Now it's, how do I deal with it in this specific circumstance? And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with.
And people are being bombarded with constant, your news feed. The first thing that we almost do on a daily basis that a lot of people are doing is looking at statistics of what's happening in the country, how many cases you have. And I think even on social media, something that people, I think, sometimes use it as a way to escape. Now on social media, a lot of it is centered around COVID-19, and people are sort of bombarded with information, and all of that is anxiety inducing.
Exactly. And it's not just, in a normal context, you might go onto social media in the mornings or at lunchtime. Now, if you are lucky enough to work at home, you have something to keep you busy, but you are way more exposed. For a lot of people, they're exposed to this on a daily basis, and it's oftentimes conflictual information. On the one side, you get people that agree with everything that's been released in the media. It's a terrible thing, it's a terrible virus, and that obviously promotes more anxiety in some people. But then you get other people that don't believe it. But it's not just the people themselves, it's the media. Some sources which suggest that it's not a big thing, and that other illnesses are more prevalent and kill more people. And then you get other sources that would suggest, no, this is a hectic thing, you should really be worried and take precautions. Conflicting information from people that should know. And for someone like me, it's confusing. And when a lot of people experience confusion, they experience a lack of control.
Yeah.
When there's a lack of control, there's anxiety.
Uncertainty brings up a lot of anxiety for a lot of people. And I think people generally have a lot of autonomy and control and freedom in their daily lives, and all of that's being challenged now. Their agency is removed. If we even look at cigarettes and alcohol not being sold, that's something that I think a lot of people use as coping strategies.
Mm.
Not effective ones, but it's something that people rely on and they go to get through a day for some people. And I think now, with this being taken away, it's another place where they have that lack of control and a change in their normal daily structure.
Again, the theme of autonomy being taken away. Initially, you couldn't go out.
Yeah.
Now you can't buy what you normally would buy to cope with the situation. We know how many people smoke and drink and how it helped them over time and currently is helping them. But now, not just the anxiety of not having your cigarette or your drink, but the anxiety of where will it come from and what to do. It's almost like a layered approach that people are starting to see. And I think that brings about even more energy on a daily basis.
And one thing also is that for a lot of people, the home environment is a very triggering, I think people and families, we see it here so often, where families are often a source of a trigger and brings up anxiety and brings up a lot of maybe fear and anger and unresolved feelings for us. And now people are being forced to sit face to face with the same people every day, and they don't have those normal coping strategies, and they can't go and see a friend. They can't go and get out of the house and, like you said, exercise or engage in their normal routine and that normal escape. And I think we need to look at some coping strategies of how people can manage during this time because of all those sort of normal coping strategies being taken away from them.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important to understand that when we talk about coping strategies, it literally means coping with. I had a question from a patient the other day: how can I get rid of anxiety? So if we look at the anxiety to performance and what it means for us, the Yerkes-Dodson law tells us that we do need a certain level of anxiety to perform effectively. And now all of these things have been challenged. Getting rid of anxiety is not something that we can do. Coping with it, absolutely. But now we have to understand the context that we are in and do what we do as human beings. We have this ability, this innate ability to adapt. And we can do that quite effectively. But now it is our thinking that's in the way of dealing with this. And, I think that's where we need to start in breaking this thing down is, I can't get rid of it. It will be there. But how can I cope with this? How can I deal with this thing on a daily basis, step by step? And if you think about it, it's new circumstances has been, enforced on people. And we need to adapt to the current structure.
And I think what a lot of people are doing is they are comparing their life before lockdown and before this crisis to how it is now. And that really brings up a big sense of loss and fear and all of these uncertainties. And I think an important maybe change of perspective or view on this is also to realize that making that comparison between how our lives used to be and how it is now is often not really helpful for us to view it in that way. And I think this also brings up the opportunity for different activities to be engaged in, different ways of being. It sort of has slowed everything down. And I've heard of so many people playing cards for the first time or playing games in a family and doing activities that and often they said they've never had time for that. So I think it is important to look at the things that the opportunity that this brings and how we can adapt and how our lives can change for this current situation. And I think that's important to take into consideration and to almost, I think we spend so much of our lives either living in the past or thinking of the past and being worried about things that happen in our past and going over it, or worried about the future. And it's almost seldom that we are just present in the moment. And that's one coping strategy that I think is quite useful for people to employ, that mindfulness, that it's almost, I think it presents itself in different ways. For some people that can be meditation, sitting, focusing on your breath, being aware of your body. For other people, myself included, that doesn't work for me. I am more focused on reflecting, being aware of my situation, if I look at a tree, actually looking at the tree, being present in that moment,
Yeah.
and not being so almost consumed by
Yeah.
our thoughts, I think is important.
Absolutely. I think it's important to understand that you're not alone. A lot of people are experiencing anxiety, and due to various reasons, I know people that have lost their jobs, companies that are suffering, families that obviously are not doing so well because of all of these, ripple effects that you'll see in the economy, and how that presents on a daily system. Might be anger, frustration, all of these things come out, and I personally believe that it has to do with the anxiety, feeling trapped and being in that system where normally, and we mentioned this in earlier in the video, that usually people could get out. Now they can't. And some of the aspects that we know works, for example, exercise. How can we take this concept, and this is where people need to start getting creative. And I think this virus situation has shown a lot of people that they can adapt. And most of us can. And we should, because it's your sanity at stake. You will be more vulnerable to anxiety, to things going wrong, if we don't adapt to what we have. A simple thing, how can we take exercise that we know works and apply that to the context where I'm at home? Do you have a garden? Do you have a pool? Do you have equipment? Answer basic questions to a specific thing we know. If we know yoga works, how can we implement it in our life?
And I also just want to add, implementing it in a way that works for you.
Yes.
It doesn't need to be the way that it works for someone else, but implementing it how it's effective for you.
That's very important, because a lot of these things that you find, you might Google a few things, it works for them, or it's suggested that we should do this, a handstand a day keeps the doctor away, something like that. It doesn't mean it will work for you. I myself find that I reflect much better than I would, for example, sit and do yoga. I prefer exercise, above something like drawing. Basic things, and we need to identify what works. But I also see a pattern with people where they struggle to get started.
Yeah.
Or they do get started, but it's not the way that they've done it in the past. Again, comparing it to something that they used to.
Yeah.
And then they stop doing it. Or they don't explore enough. It's one thing, either yoga or meditation, but nothing more than that. There's very few bits and pieces that they are either willing to or know about to explore.
And I think it needs to be something that's practical for your daily life. Having a schedule is so important during this time. And I think sort of what you mentioned about people starting something but not continuing with it, I think it's often because people feel like they need to do it in a certain way, or they need to be perfect at it. And it's all these expectations that we place on ourselves, when in reality, these are things meant to support us, not add more pressure or add more anxiety. So I think we need to implement, even if it's 10 minutes twice a day, that you just engage with something, or even just experience the world around you, just take a second to be present. I mean, even 5 minutes twice a day. I think people have these expectations of I need to meditate for an hour, or I need to exercise for an hour, and that's not, oftentimes for a lot of people, it's not practical, and we need to implement it in a way that we can sustain, and that it's okay if today I don't feel like exercise. That's okay.
Exactly.
It's not something to beat yourself up about. It's something to enhance your health and enhance your well-being.
Exactly. I think it's important to understand that a concept like anxiety, it's really a simple thing to understand. It has a powerful, devastating effect if not understood and if not really taking steps to deal with it. But it's actually really simple. And if you can understand how it works and what it can do, and you've probably felt this, I mean, if you're watching this video, you probably searched for something, for answers. It's something that you can break up into very basic elements. And if you can achieve these elements with something that works for you, then that is success. As Lisa just said, if you don't exercise today, it's not the end of the world. But at least try something. Search for more things. If you want to draw, try it. If you want to do a handstand, try it. If you want to go for a swim, if you're lucky enough to have a pool, try it. But don't sit and do nothing constantly because that will bring up more anxiety, unless that is part of your process, unless that is how you reflect, how you deal with the energy. Essentially, anything that you can do to deal with that energy, and this is where we can be creative. We can sit here and we can say, science and medicine tells us we do this, psychology refers to this, do this, do this. It doesn't mean it's going to work. We need to take what we know, and you need to take what you can and what you know works for you and adapt it to the situation that you have at the moment.
And I find that a lot of people during this time are isolating themselves. They're completely withdrawing. And I think that it is important to keep contact with family members, with friends, with the social support systems that we do have, even if that looks different. If we can't go out and meet a friend for coffee, but we can have a Skype session or check in regularly, I think that's also so important. And then also to have boundaries. I mean, a lot of families are having to work and have kids at home. It's a lot to deal with, and I think having those boundaries, realizing that taking time for yourself is important, because you are valid and you are important, and that's okay. I think having certain rules at home, certain times where the kids are not allowed to come into your room if you're busy with work or whatever it is, to have those boundaries to create a safe space for yourself is crucial during this time.
I think something like this, a basic concept like that, where parents now have to be, if you will, the teachers, the enforcer, all of these different roles all at once. Family that is constantly in the same house, some are feeling trapped. I mean, I think we are on day 40 or something like that with lockdown. It's quite a long time for a lot of people to be stuck in the same situation. And we need to find new ways to adapt to these anxieties. And you'll find that it presents differently in different people. Some will be lethargic and somewhat depressed. Others would have a lot of energy. Some people's diets would be affected. We spoke briefly about this in the previous video. But to be mindful of all of these things and to look out for it. I mean, if you can identify it within yourself and identify it within others, and then open the topic to talk about it. Talking about anxiety releases so much energy. It releases so much pent-up energy and feelings that oftentimes the people I see in practice, they just needed that one chat, that talk.
That's important. And I think communicating with each other of what you need. Often we take for granted that my way of supporting you is this, and that's great. But oftentimes people need different support. Some people need more practical support. So I need you to help with the kids or cook dinner tonight or whatever it is, where other times I just need you to listen. I don't want advice. I don't want to hear anything. I just need you to be there. And I think communicating during this time is so important.
Very.
So I think those are just a few of the tips. And I think, like you said, which is so crucial, is for people to keep trying. Find what works for you. Implement that, even if it's 2 minutes a day. Create a space for you to sort of have that self-care. It's so important.
Absolutely. So basically, to end off, what you can take from the video is to understand that anxiety won't go away. It is not something that should be taken out of the equation. It is a normal, natural response. How we can deal with it and adapt and cope with it is very important. And we need you to identify what works for you and adapt what has worked in the past with what you have at the moment. Otherwise, it will just build up more and more. And don't be scared to talk about anxiety, whether it's with a professional or whether it's with your family members, to address the topic as best as you can. Again, thank you for watching. And if you guys have any questions, comment down below and we will try and answer them as best and as effectively as possible. Thank you.
Thanks.